Can you imagine being the most famous person on the planet, creating the best-selling album in human history, selling out stadiums around the world, and yet taking your final breath completely drowning in $500 million of debt? That is the dark, heavily guarded secret of the king of pop. But the real mystery isn't how Michael Jackson lost it all. The real mystery is the absolute masterclass in financial resurrection that happened after his heart stopped beating. How does a man who passed away in financial ruin manage to generate over $3 billion from beyond the grave? Prepare yourselves, because the paper trail left behind by Michael Jackson's estate reads like a Hollywood thriller, complete with family betrayal, secret boardroom negotiations, a mother fighting against her own son's empire, and a record-breaking catalog deal that shattered every music industry record ever set.
Welcome back to MJ Fan TV. The King of Pop's legacy continues to shake the world. From breaking news to biopic updates and box office milestones, this story is something every MJ fan needs to hear. Stay with us till the end, because today's update will surprise you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Welcome back to the channel. Today we are tearing down the velvet ropes and opening up the financial vault of the most legendary and controversial entertainer who ever lived. Michael Jackson's life was a spectacle of unimaginable peaks and devastating valleys. We all know the music, the moonwalk, the glittering glove, and the controversies that shadowed his later years. But what most people do not understand is the sheer magnitude of his financial empire and the shocking state it was in on June 25th, 2009. This story matters because it completely rewrites the legacy of the king of pop. It is a story about the ruthless machinery of the Hollywood music business and the lengths to which executives and family members will go to protect or exploit a multi-billion-dollar legacy. By the time we reach the end of this deep dive, you are going to see Michael Jackson not just as an artist, but as the centerpiece of the most astonishing corporate turnaround in modern history. And I promise you, the recent revelations surrounding the historic 2024 Sony deal and the fierce courtroom battles involving his mother, Katherine Jackson, will leave you absolutely speechless. The day the world stopped spinning was June 25th, 2009. News of Michael Jackson's sudden passing sent shockwaves across the globe, crashing the internet and leaving millions of fans mourning in the streets. But while the public was weeping for a musical icon, a much darker, much more panicked reality was unfolding behind closed doors. The moment Michael's death was confirmed, a team of lawyers, accountants, and industry insiders scrambled to assess the wreckage of his financial life. And wreckage is the only word for it. According to explosive court documents that would later become public, Michael Jackson was roughly $500 million in debt when he died. Yes, $500 million in the red. How could the man who gave us Thriller, Bad, and Billie Jean be completely broke? The truth is, Michael was a genius in the recording studio, but his spending habits were completely untethered from reality. Observers noted that he was reportedly burning through $30 to $50 million a year just to maintain his eccentric lifestyle. He was purchasing exotic animals, rare antiquities, massive estates like Neverland Ranch, and funding a lifestyle that outpaced even his colossal royalty checks. But that is only part of the story. Michael had relied heavily on massive loans to float his extravagant expenses. He used his most prized possession, his 50% stake in the Sony/ATV music publishing catalog, which famously included the rights to the Beatles songs, as collateral. Creditors were circling. Foreclosure notices were looming over Neverland. Michael was essentially forced into signing up for the This Is It residency at the O2 Arena in London, an exhausting 50-show run that many insiders believe he was physically incapable of completing. He was under an unbelievable amount of stress, pushed to the brink by the crushing weight of his financial obligations. When the news of his death broke, the initial assessment of his estate was grim. The IRS would later value his likeness at a fraction of what you might expect, and the immediate fear was that his children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, would be left with nothing but mountains of inherited debt. The estate was completely frozen, trapped in a legal and financial purgatory. But as the world mourned, two men stepped into the chaos. armed with a will that would soon trigger one of the most vicious family wars in Hollywood history. To truly understand the chaotic aftermath of Michael's death, we have to look at the masterstroke he pulled off decades earlier. The foundation of the Jackson Empire wasn't actually his own music. In 1985, against the advice of almost everyone in his inner circle, Michael made the most brilliant business move of his life. He purchased the ATV music publishing catalog for $47.5 million. This wasn't just any catalog. It contained the publishing rights to the majority of the Beatles' greatest hits. Industry veterans laughed at him. They thought he overpaid. But 10 years later, in 1995, Michael merged his catalog with Sony Music to create Sony/ATV, pocketing over $100 million in cash while retaining a 50% stake in the newly formed mega company. It was a deal of unprecedented leverage. Over the years, as his album sales slowed and his personal controversies mounted, that catalog became his financial lifeline. It was the only thing keeping the wolves at bay. However, by the mid-2000s, Michael was drowning. He was repeatedly refinancing his massive loans, leveraging that very catalog to secure hundreds of millions in cash just to stay afloat. Fans speculate that the immense pressure from these financial institutions contributed heavily to his deteriorating health and reliance on prescription medications. He was a king living on borrowed time and borrowed money. When Michael's will was officially entered into probate in 2009, it named his longtime attorney John Branca and music executive John McClane as the executors of his estate. The will laid out a very specific vision for his wealth. 40% was allocated to his 3 children, 40% to his mother Katherine Jackson, and 20% to various children's charities. Noticeably absent from the will, his father, Joe Jackson, and all of his siblings. This exclusion set the stage for an explosive familial clash. Almost immediately, the legitimacy of the will was questioned by certain members of the Jackson family. They simply could not believe that Michael would hand the keys to his kingdom to industry executives while completely cutting out his brothers and sisters. But John Branca and John McClane were not there to play family politics. They were there to execute a rescue mission. The estate was practically on life support, burdened by $500 million in debt. They had to act fast, and they had to be ruthless. What happened behind closed doors was even more surprising. The executors immediately launched an aggressive monetization strategy that would make Wall Street titans blush. They realized that Michael Jackson the man was highly controversial and financially exhausted, but Michael Jackson the brand was immortal. The demand for his music in the wake of his death was unprecedented. First came the documentary film This Is It, compiled from the rehearsal footage of his doomed London residency. The estate struck a massive deal with Sony Pictures to release the film, which went on to gross over $260 million worldwide. Suddenly, fresh cash was flowing into the estate. But the executors didn't stop there. They negotiated a new, massively lucrative recording contract with Sony Music, promising a slate of posthumous albums filled with unreleased material. While the estate was busy raking in hundreds of millions, the Jackson family was reportedly fracturing behind the scenes. Katherine Jackson, the beloved matriarch, was thrust into the center of the storm. As the guardian of Michael's children and a major beneficiary of the estate, she held significant influence. But sources claim that the extended family was fiercely divided over the management of the estate. Various siblings launched public campaigns, questioning the executors' decisions and the authenticity of the will itself. There were bizarre incidents, including a highly publicized moment where Katherine Jackson was allegedly taken out of state by some of her children, leading to temporary changes in the guardianship of Michael's kids. Fans watched in disbelief as the family drama played out on the evening news. Social media was ablaze with conspiracy theories. Was the estate trying to cut the family out completely? Were the executors acting in the best interest of Michael's children, or were they simply enriching themselves? Despite the intense public scrutiny and family infighting, the business of being Michael Jackson continued to boom. The estate partnered with Cirque du Soleil to create highly successful touring and Las Vegas shows, further cementing Michael's legacy and generating steady, massive revenue streams. By carefully managing his image and fiercely protecting his intellectual property, the executors managed to completely wipe out the $500 million of debt within just a few years. It was an astonishing achievement. But the estate was about to face its biggest battle yet, not with the family, but with the United States government, because what happened next surprised even longtime fans. Just as the estate was finally breathing a sigh of financial relief, the Internal Revenue Service came knocking. And they were not looking for a small settlement. The IRS audited the estate and concluded that the executors had wildly undervalued Michael's assets at the time of his death. The estate had valued Michael's likeness at a mere $2,000, arguing that his image was heavily tarnished by scandals at the time of his passing. The IRS, however, valued his likeness at a staggering $434 million. The IRS claimed the estate owed over $700 million in back taxes and penalties. It was a crippling blow that threatened to completely bankrupt the estate all over again. The legal battle that ensued was brutal, dragging on for years in tax court. The estate's legal team fought tooth and nail, arguing that the IRS was taxing the post-death success built by the executors, rather than the actual value of Michael's ruined reputation in 2009 and a massive victory for the estate in 2021. The tax court largely ruled in their favor, drastically lowering the value of the likeness and saving the estate hundreds of millions of dollars. But the tax nightmare caused major collateral damage. Because the estate was locked in this endless IRS battle, the trust meant to provide for Michael's children and his mother could not be fully funded. The family was reportedly living on highly generous allowances, but the actual principal of the estate remained frozen in probate, and this is where things took an unexpected turn. Knowing they needed a massive influx of secure capital, the estate made a monumental decision in 2016. They sold Michael's 50% stake in Sony/ATV back to Sony for a jaw-dropping $750 million. It was the end of an era. The legendary catalog that Michael had purchased against all odds was finally fully absorbed by Sony. The payday was historic, officially cementing Michael Jackson as the highest-earning dead celebrity in the world. But the executors knew they could go even further. They set their sights on Michael's own music, the Midjack catalog, which contained the publishing rights to his solo masterpieces. And the deal they would ultimately strike in 2024 would shatter everything we thought we knew about the value of music. Rumors began to swirl in late 2023 that the Michael Jackson estate was quietly shopping a massive stake in his catalog. When the news finally broke in early 2024, the entertainment industry came to a complete standstill. According to multiple credible reports, Sony Music Group had agreed to purchase a 50% stake in Michael Jackson's publishing and recorded masters catalog. The valuation? A mind-numbing $1.2 billion to $1.5 billion. This meant Sony was paying at least $600 million in cold, hard cash for just half of the king of pop's musical legacy. It was the largest valuation of a musician's assets in global history. The media erupted. Financial analysts were stunned. But while Wall Street celebrated, a massive civil war was erupting within the Jackson family. Katherine Jackson, now in her 90s, was reportedly furious. She filed legal objections, attempting to block the Sony deal entirely. Her argument was rooted in deep emotion. She claimed that selling Michael's catalog violated his core wishes. According to her legal team, Michael had always viewed his catalog as his most precious asset, the crown jewel of his life's work, and he would never have wanted it sold off to a massive corporation. The courtroom battle was incredibly tense. On one side, you had the executors, arguing that selling a 50% stake was a brilliant financial maneuver that capitalized on peak market conditions while still maintaining partial ownership and control. On the other side, you had a grieving mother trying to protect what she believed was the soul of her son's legacy. But in a shocking twist, Katherine did not have the support of all her grandchildren. Blanket Jackson, now known as BG, legally opposed his grandmother's efforts to appeal the court's decision. His lawyers argued that fighting the deal was an extreme long shot and a massive waste of the estate's resources. It was a heartbreaking public division. A grandson standing against his grandmother over a $600 million deal. In August 2024, an appellate court delivered the final crushing blow. They ruled against Katherine Jackson, allowing the historic Sony deal to proceed. The court determined that the executors were acting well within the broad powers granted to them by Michael's will. The reaction from fans was deeply divided. Many diehard supporters flooded social media, expressing sadness that Michael's life work was being sold off to the very industry executives he often publicly clashed with during his life. They felt it was the ultimate betrayal. Others, however, acknowledged the cold, hard math. The estate had transformed a man deeply in debt into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. To truly grasp the magnitude of this situation, we must look at the broader landscape of the music industry. The sale of the Mijak catalog is not an isolated incident. It is the absolute peak of a massive trend where legacy artists are cashing in their life's work for astronomical sums. But Michael Jackson's case is entirely unique because of the sheer scale of the turnaround. Consider the career background. Michael Jackson redefined the entire medium of the music video, broke racial barriers on MTV, and set sales records that will